Here is Karen Daly, who will give us information that we need also. Thank you, Karen, you're on.
Good morning, ladies. It's wonderful to be with you, we will definitely make sure to get information about the NSCDA accreditation program so that we can share that with the full group as soon as we have an opportunity at the mic. I have to check on the details. I am here today to talk about fundraising for your museum properties, and I want to start by just letting you all know that you are part of an esteemed group of tremendous fundraisers. The NSCDA, if you think about it, has been around since 1891. We have a 100-year rich history, and your ancestors before you have accomplished incredible feats during difficult times, none of which would have been possible without significant financial support. If I look back in the NSCDA histories, I look, for example, at the erection of the canopy over Plymouth Rock. I look at the erection of the Spanish-American War Memorial. I look at the acquisition of a headquarters, a historic property in Washington, D.C., and then a significant restoration and furnishing of that historic property at the height of the Great Depression. And I see a legacy of tremendous fundraisers in your ranks, and I see that carried forth today. So you all in this room probably have a tremendous amount to offer our group here today. So I am going to try to go quickly through my talking at you part of the presentation, and then allow more time for Q&A and for sharing. And if we don't have a tremendous amount of time while I'm kind of up here at the mic to facilitate that, please continue the dialogue over lunch and in the sessions that follow, because I think that one of the great benefits of these programs is the opportunity to talk with each other and share ideas that have been successful, or even lessons learned from some of those not so successful ideas at your sites. I also want to thank and credit Jane Boylan, who is the chair of our NSCDA Development Committee, for a lot of the material that we'll be talking about today. Jane wishes you all well and is available to help with your fundraising efforts out in your home states as well. And Jane would start, here's our goals for today. We're going to talk a little bit about focusing on planning, which is where Jane would want us all to start. There should be no fundraising in Jane's eyes if we don't have a plan behind it. We're going to then provide a quick overview of fundraising options. I call it kind of a smorgasbord. And then we're going to consider during that smorgasbord the benefits, but also some of the costs of fundraising and the different types of fundraising we can do. And we'll have some opportunity to share lessons learned. I'm going to try to stop talking at you by 12 so that we have about 15 minutes to talk. Scott, if you can be my timekeeper and give me a heads up when it's 12. I left my phone on the table, which is my handy clock. So, no fundraising without planning. And I wanted to first ask, I know that Dr. Bryan asked this earlier, and I'm sorry I couldn't see your responses, but how many of you in this room have a strategic plan at your museum property? Or that applies. Okay, so most of you have a strategic plan, although some don't. And so if your hand wasn't up, I think that's probably going to be homework assignment number 1 when you get back home to your museum. Some kind of written long-range plan that sets out a vision for your museum. It could be a 3-year plan, it could be a 5-year plan, maybe it's 10 years, although that's usually a little bit long for most of us. But a vision. What do you want to accomplish for your institution? What are the steps you're going to take to get there? What are the deadlines by which those steps are going to be taken? And who is assigned the task of making sure it happens? The Dumbarton House Strategic Plan has an example of the types of categories you might cover in that strategic plan. We, of course, look at our headquarters role. We look at education, interpretation, and collections. But then we also look at support roles like marketing and PR and fundraising. So any good fundraising is going to start first with your strategic plan, because your strategic plan lays out what you want to accomplish as an organization, and then of course anything that you want to accomplish is going to have dollars attached to it. So then from that strategic plan should come your development or fundraising plan. It should complement that strategy. So how are you going to get to that end point? It should identify the methods of fundraising that you're going to pursue. It'll detail those fundraising goals and strategies with more specifics than you would see in your strategic plan. It might have sections like board giving, or annual fund goals, or corporate sponsorships, or museum memberships. It's going to assign who does what, how much time it's going to take. If you're starting a new initiative, how much board time is it going to take, how much staff time. How many of you in the room have paid staff working for your museums? Okay, most. Are there any of you working with fully volunteer-run museums? Okay, one. So we've got one fully volunteer-run organization. The rest of us have some staff support. Fewer than 5 staff? Okay. So I think that's probably pretty typical for our Dames properties, maybe even more staffed than many. So we have to divide up the labor. What role is staff playing in fundraising versus what role is the board going to play, and how much and who? And then again, from these specific areas of fundraising and these strategies that you're going to look at, what's the projected income? We'll talk about, again, a smorgasbord of options. I think we often get excited about the potential opportunity or a fundraising opportunity that might seem more fun than another type of fundraising. But at the end of the day, you want to look at the projected income and do a cost benefit. You can't do everything, and so Jane's motto, which I've adopted, is what can you do the most simply that's going to raise the most money? So how can you get the most money the most simply? We've got to pick and choose, start with those opportunities, and then grow from there. So we've got our strategic plan in place. And then we've got our development, our fundraising plan to support that strategic plan that lays out how we're going to raise the dollars to advance the strategic priorities. And in that fundraising plan, we might see, and probably would see, some kind of annual appeal or fund or campaign. For Dumbarton House, the example, of course, is the Friends of Dumbarton House annual mailed solicitation. An annual appeal is generally for unrestricted gifts. The cost of an annual appeal can range dramatically. So it can be very inexpensive if it's a totally online appeal that goes out to your constituents via an email blast, or if it's a very small mailer that goes out to 50 or 100 people in your community. Or it can be a very costly endeavor if you're mailing 15,000 multi-page full-color pieces to members across the country. So your annual appeal costs can range dramatically, and of course there's going to be a labor cost as well as just the, in addition to just the manufacture and mailing costs. Before you roll out an annual appeal, how many of y'all have annual appeals? Okay, so many of you know this. And you need to have, before you kick it out, of course, a process in place for the annual appeal. So who drafts the solicitations? When do they get drafted? How do we process the donations once they come in? Who's responsible for that? Has our accounting vetted the language that we're using and the process that we're using? Who's processing acknowledgments, tax receipts? Are there other personal thank you notes that go out? Who's handling them? Is there any special recognition for donors above a certain level, or does everybody get treated the same? Recognition and cultivation of those donors. The annual appeal is usually in fundraising kind of the bottom of a pyramid of fundraising, where you look to kind of canvas wide and broad support from a large number of people in relatively small amounts, and then bring them up the pyramid. So the annual appeal is usually toward the bottom of that pyramid as you move up from there. As you move up, you want to catch in your annual appeal the folks who are willing and able to make more major gifts, and invite people to kind of move up the pyramid with an annual appeal. So do you have something in place to encourage and recognize major contributions?
We realized a number of years ago at Dumbarton House that we had a large number of low dollar amount donors, and that's wonderful. We want to encourage that. We want you to participate at any level. But we also have a number of folks who would be interested in supporting us at a higher level. And so we instituted new giving societies to recognize those higher level donations. We have a Daly Madison Society and an Abigail Adams Society, and are about to roll out a Martha Washington Society, and then a Chairman's Circle. And so there are ways to encourage folks who are willing and able to move up the giving pyramid and become major donors. Renewing donors, keeping the donors you have, is much more affordable and efficient than trying to recruit new donors. So you want to take very good care of your existing donors. You want to communicate with them and cultivate them and recognize them as often as you can so that you retain them. Jane said in a recent presentation, Jane Boylan, that it can be about 10 times as costly to recruit a new customer, a new client, a new donor, as it is to retain your existing donor base. So you want to try again to keep those existing donors and communicate with them frequently to keep them engaged. In addition to the annual appeal, we also have at our disposal the opportunity, of course, to do special solicitations. So annual appeal, again, are generally unrestricted giving. Special solicitations would generally be for some restricted or designated purpose. An example might be an Adopt an Object program that you have to specifically support conservation efforts at your museum. Recently at Dumbarton House, of course, we acquired the Lemoyne Sampler, which is an important example of our country's early history and the role that women played in documenting it. Those are special solicitations done for a specific purpose. So when donors give, they're giving for that restricted purpose. The cost for a special solicitation is generally a short duration, but they can be labor intensive depending on the program. So for us, the Adopt an Object program is relatively low cost because we simply identify the items that we need to have conserved, and we have conservation assessments on them to figure out how much it's going to cost to conserve them, and then we let people know about those opportunities. For the Lemoyne Sampler solicitation, it was low cost in terms of dollars. It was a specific targeted group, as special solicitations usually are, but it was a short duration, so we had to raise a lot of money very quickly. That meant lots of organizing meetings and phone calls and outreach. So you want to consider that before you dive into any of these initiatives. Another kind of special solicitation that's come up kind of more recently is crowdfunding. And I wonder if any of you here have done anything with Kickstarter or Indiegogo or GoFundMe. Have you heard of them? Okay, so some of you have heard of them. This is, I think, a really interesting trend in fundraising because a lot of these websites, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe, they're online opportunities to put out a project and to secure funding for it. What I find most interesting from a kind of a trends in the field perspective is that they're not just nonprofits. So if you have a personal business or project that you want to get investors for, you can put forth that project as well on Kickstarter. And so you see nonprofits up here competing against for-profit projects. I think it's fascinating. It could be a whole session in and of itself, but crowdfunding is coming and growing. It is here, and we see a great example in the Morris Jamal Mansion. Am I pronouncing that correctly? In New York? Jamal? Okay. In New York City, it's a historic site in New York City, beautiful mansion. They have a Save the Mansion campaign right now on Indiegogo. They're trying to raise $40,000, I think, in 4 months or 4 weeks, I forget. But they have a great little video, and you can sign on and pledge and then get a thank you note or some other kind of gift for your donation. So crowdfunding is a new type of special solicitation supported by recent technology initiatives. Of course, in addition to special solicitation, we can pursue grants. I am not going to spend hardly any time on this because the wonderful Julie Gatlin is going to be speaking on this after lunch. Grants are usually restricted. The cost can be variable, huge time commitment in terms of application and also in terms of planning for the grant schedule of when the money is going to roll in and how you're going to implement it. I will only say that I see a lot of times board members saying, oh, we've got to go for grants. Grants will solve all of our financial problems. Grants are the answer. And grants are a piece of the answer, but they cannot be the only piece of your fundraising puzzle, because they can never, will never support kind of 100% of your operating on any kind of annual basis. They're a piece of the answer, but not the full answer. Corporate sponsorships is our next stop on our fundraising smorgasbord. At Dumbarton House, an example is that we have an ongoing, or second year, I guess, running sponsorship from Long & Foster, which is one of our local real estate companies, to sponsor our summer film festival. We have a Jane Austen Film Fest. And so as a result of the sponsorship, we're allowed to offer the program for free. It runs monthly in the summer for our community, very successful. The costs are typically pretty limited in a corporate sponsorship. Usually it's a matter of pitching to your friends in the business community in your local area. But you have to get out there and meet those business associates. You have to invite them in and tell them about what you're doing. And as Dr. Bryan so eloquently put this morning, you have to have a compelling case to bring to that corporate entity so that they'll want to buy into your programs. In terms of possible drawbacks, I would say just consider the reputation of any potential sponsors, of course, before you invite them in, because if Long & Foster is now attached to the Dumbarton House Film Fest, we want to make sure Long & Foster doesn't have a negative association in the community, because that wouldn't benefit us in the end. And you want to avoid, with corporate sponsorships, strings attached offers. With corporate sponsorships generally, they are giving you an unrestricted gift for the museum operation, and you are giving them thanks. And that's about it. If you start giving them more than thanks, it's not really a corporate sponsorship. It gets into a lot of other issues with IRS and deductibility, so you don't want to go there. Try to stay away from strings attached. Give them lots of thanks, public and private, and thank them for their money. Another area that we're going to talk about later this afternoon are Friends programs, so I won't spend much time on it, but they should of course be considered as a part of your fundraising plan. Do you want to encourage museum memberships or Friends groups, folks from typically beyond the Dames Circle, to join in supporting your museum? The costs for Friends programs, they can be potentially labor intensive to establish or establish communication if you don't have a lot of programming already in place that you can leverage for a Friends program. And again, we'll spend more time talking about them this afternoon. There we go. Planned giving. How many of you all have a planned giving program or planned giving as a part of your fundraising efforts at your museum? Okay, just a couple hands. So after a strategic plan on your homework assignment, ladies, if you don't already have one, I would put planned giving as your next homework assignment. If you haven't thought about planned giving, if you haven't worked it into your fundraising plan, when you go home from here, if you do nothing else, look at planned giving. For the NSCDA and Dumbarton House, we have a Dumbarton House Fund for the Future Legacy Circle, and the Legacy Circle honors and recognizes those who have placed the NSCDA or the Fund for the Future in their will. Planned giving costs can be minimal if you're talking about encouraging bequests and having folks, include your museum in their will. It's a matter, again, of letting them know that you want that kind of a gift, and then encouraging it, and then recognizing individuals who wish to be recognized for leaving that kind of legacy gift. It can also be a matter of profiling folks who have left your museum a bequest, and making sure to profile those donors in your publications or at your meetings to thank them and to show others what kind of an impact their gift, their bequest could have on your organization. Generally, these are not hard sells. You don't typically, call somebody up and ask them to put you in their will. But they're part of a longer-term fundraising plan, and you want to provide opportunities for folks to ask you about the opportunity and so that they can get involved. There can be more complicated planned gifts, things like charitable remainder trusts and real estate and lots of things. And I am not a tax attorney, and I am not a planned giving expert. There's a lot of options out there. It can go from the very simple of leaving a bequest to a very complicated but perhaps financially rewarding opportunity, and it's worth looking into, particularly given the demographics of our primary stakeholders and our members. It's important, and the growing demographics of baby boomers who are coming, both within our membership and beyond. Rental events. I kind of break with what have been to this point primarily contributions or gifts that are given, just because they want to support our efforts, to a rental event which is an earned income opportunity. So this is something that you have to provide something in order to receive. So they're generally not contributions because you're providing a space for the individual to rent. Examples, of course, are hosting weddings at your historic site or corporate meetings, dinner parties. The costs can range here dramatically. I think costs for rental events can be pretty significant, and I see a lot of small museums and small historic sites undervaluing their site when they rent. The costs here, ladies, can be huge. I mean, if you think about the wear and tear and the impact on your facility, if you think about the potential PR damage if a loud, rowdy, raucous wedding goes awry at 2 a.m. with your next door neighbors, and particularly if you're in a historic district with many affluent neighbors like ours in Georgetown, you really want to consider those possible costs and actual costs when you're pricing and deciding to wade into the rental events waters. We've also found that staffing is critical and can be costly. You not only need staff on site to make sure that your site is cared for, but you need to drum up business and you need to be responding to the inquiries that come in. You can use volunteer staff for that. You can outsource. I know some sites use contractors or vendors like caterers to facilitate the rental. So there's a number of different models for how you can implement it. At Dumbarton House, it is a huge and successful piece of our income puzzle. So I do not want to understate that. It is very important to our income production. But go into it with your eyes open and make sure that you know what you're getting into before you dive in. How many of you all do rent your facility? Okay, so lots of us have seen this as an opportunity. I don't think I know many museums anymore that don't consider renting for some types of functions. Trips and galas and events. These can be things, of course, like gala dinners, garden parties, exhibition auctions like we had recently at Dumbarton House. These can be labor intense and expensive, so if you're typically going to run one successfully, it's important to have a strong core committee, a strong local host committee, as well as to get as much as possible donated. If you wind up spending a ton on the event, you're not making a significant amount for your site, and then it might not be truly as profitable as you might like. Also, define pretty early on if this is a fundraiser or a friend raiser. I find that a lot of times what we're really trying to accomplish with these functions is sharing our mission and program or engaging people in the community with what we're doing. We're looking to build friends, and that's a different kind of financial model for planning than if you're looking at it to truly be a fundraising opportunity. It also could take some time to grow, so don't necessarily plan for your first fundraising gala to bring in $100,000, even though the site down the street might accomplish that. You need to, again, give time for these things to build up and get moving. So don't rule them out, but again, determine early on whether this is fundraising or friend raising and how it fits in your planning. Some things to consider. Again, go back to your plans. What are you trying to raise money for? Is that project or need a strategic priority? Does it appear in your strategic plan? How much money do you need for it? How quickly do you need it? What method best aligns with their goals? And I find oftentimes, ladies, we think that because we work on behalf of nonprofits, that means that we can't have a profitable business. That is not true. If you are a nonprofit, it just means that you're not kicking out those profits to shareholders at the end of the day. You're reinvesting those profits to advance your mission. It is totally appropriate to make money. So don't feel bad about making money or being successful in your fundraising endeavors. We need to raise funds to expand our mission and our ability to advance our mission, so we can keep investing in our product. So, do we have a few minutes? Yes, I'm right at 12. Perfect. What has worked well for you all? What questions do you have? If we can't spend a ton of time talking and dialoguing about them all together now, at least we might be able to see who in the group has questions to follow up with over lunch or at the next break. Yes?
How do you make the approach for the planned giving?
So the question was, how do we make an approach for planned giving? And my advice, and what I've typically heard, is you don't usually make an approach about planned giving. You promote that you have an opportunity to leave a planned gift, or to set up a planned gift, or to give a planned gift. And so you market the planned giving program, but you're not generally doing hard sell asks.
No.
Does that make sense? So you would establish a legacy circle, you would put information about it in your newsletters, even a simple statement. I've seen on a lot of Dame's publications of, the NSCDA in this state gratefully accepts, bequests. If you would like to designate us in your will, here is the language to use. Making that available is how you would generally start. Yes, Jane.
I'm on that committee, and I think everybody needs to know that every 3 years, a letter goes out to all 15,000, am I not correct on that, with the layout for the planned giving. And I know in my alum letters, we send a card out with the Abigail Adams Society and the Daly Madison Society. So that goes in my letter twice a year to all the alums, those that have been kind and want to come back every now and then. But I don't know if we've yet developed a card to go in those letters, but it's a long skinny card that goes in my letter to, hey, we miss you, and this was going on. Big things going on in Dunbarton House now, like a new woman lady pen, and like all the colors are changing. We've remodeled the whole place, and it's just fabulous. Thanks to Karen and Scott and our staff.
And you recruit fabulous people like Jane on your committee and get them to take your message to their meetings and their programs.
I did want to know this question about my nephew did marry at Dunbarton House. Wonderful. Obviously, the time invested in developing weapons in corporate meetings is the return is worth it. That's really a question? Is the time and energy you put into that, like a tent maybe for Sunday Charlotte House, or some event? Do we make enough money to make it worth our time?
Excellent question. So Jane asked, is it worth it to rent the premises? Dunbarton House did a cost-benefit analysis about 2 years ago because we were faced with the same question. Is it worth it? Is the profit margin large enough that we're making a profit? We're not just paying for the staff to run the rental events. So we're not doing rental events to do rental events, ladies. We're doing rental events to build funds to advance our mission so we can do more preservation and more education. If we're not making a profit, it's not worth it. You don't know if you're going to make a profit until you crunch the numbers. So I would strongly advocate for doing a cost-benefit analysis before you dive in, or if you're already in, doing a cost-benefit analysis on where things stand right now. And also routinely looking at the marketplace. We looked at our pricing structure 2 years ago and realigned, I guess actually it was 3 years ago now, realigned, and we're just about to realign our pricing structure again, given the market now post-recession in DC. I also think you ladies have unique sites. You are not and should not be budget locations for events. So do not undervalue your site when it comes to rentals. So for Dunbarton House, Jane, the answer is yes, they are profitable, but we look at that at least annually to make sure that they're still profitable.
Well,
Yes?
we do in New York, which I think might be of interest to people with a smaller location than a Dunbarton House, is that we require the lessee in New York when we rent out our headquarters house, or even in Portland, we require the lessee to bring in their own catering staff. And then you can piggyback on your insurance and your liquor, extra liability and all of that, that you would not want to maintain as a standard cost of running your own museum house.
Absolutely, and we likewise do not provide anything beyond the site. So you bring in your own caterer, you pay for that separately. We also require the renter to get event insurance coverage, so single event insurance coverage to take on liability in case anything happens during that actual event. And our IRS, our accounting, our audit firm has suggested that, in fact, you don't want to get in the business of renting services. If you're renting just your site, just your structure, just your space, it's a different kind of category that is permissible. If you start renting AV support, tables and chairs, wedding planners, catering, you're getting into unrelated business, and so it's a different category, and it involves a little bit more kind of work to make that appropriate in terms of how you would account for it and pay taxes on it.
Other than written, thanks to the Legacy Circle, do you have some other manner into a pin or something concrete to thank them with?
Good question. Currently, we do not have anything concrete that we thank Legacy Circle members with. It's we of course give them personal thanks, and if they wish to be recognized, their name is included in publications like our annual report. When you self-identify to be in the Legacy Circle, and we do not ask for a copy of your will, for example, so we're not actually getting the gift when you become a member of the Legacy Circle. It's more of a promotional tool to let others know that they have the opportunity. So currently we do not have a pin or another gift, although that's not to say that that wouldn't be an option moving forward.
Our state did it.
Interesting. And was it well received?
Yes.
In Louisiana?
Yes.
Wonderful. So it could be a great way to promote the program and to encourage folks to join.
Karen, can you send us the guidelines for when you do rent Dumbarton House, your general guidelines? It might be helpful for some of the properties just to get an idea of what they need to cover.
Absolutely. Our sample rental contract and our sample rental guidelines are online at the dumbartonhouse.org website. So if you go to dumbartonhouse.org and you look at private rentals, they're right up there right now, so you can look at them at the break. We will also be placing a number of sample documents, both from ours as well as from your sites, on the nscda.org website after this conference. So Bridget, one of the documents, there's a stack of white pages there that have resources. If any of you have sample documents from the topics we're covering today and tomorrow, send them to Bridget, and we will be uploading them all to nscda.org. If you go to the members section, officers and committees, museum properties, we'll have them there as well. Yes, Eva?
Is there a tax requirement for the money earned from rentals?
Currently, Eva asked about tax requirements for monies earned from rental. I am not a tax attorney, nor am I a tax accountant. I would advise you all to seek the advice of your own tax attorneys and tax accountants. Our auditor at Dumbarton House has said that when I speak about rentals, I should make clear that it's an important differentiation is whether you own your property entirely or whether there's a mortgage on it. That does make a difference to the IRS. Also, whether you're